The Fluoride Deception. Major figures on the fluoride story. Edward L. Bernays. A propagandist and the self-styled father of public relations, Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. Among his clients were the U.S. military, Alcoa, Procter & Gamble, and Allied Signal. On behalf of big tobacco companies, he persuaded American women to smoke cigarettes. He also promoted water fluoridation, consulting on strategy for the National Institute of Dental Research. Gerald Judy Cox. A researcher at the Mellon Institute in the 1930s, where he held a fellowship from the Aluminum Company of America. Following Freire's see below suggestion, Cox reported that fluoride gave rats cavity-resistant teeth, and in 1939 made the first public proposal to add fluoride to public water supplies. Henry Trendley Dean, the U.S. Public Health Service researcher who studied dental fluorosis in areas of the United States where fluoride occurred naturally in the water supply. His fluorine caries hypothesis suggested that fluoride made teeth cavity-resistant, but also caused unsightly dental mottling. Worried about toxicity, Dean opposed adding fluoride to water in Newburgh, New York, the site of the nation's first planned water fluoridation experiment. In 1948, Dean became the first director of the National Institute of Dental Research, NIDR, and, in 1953, a top official of the American Dental Association. Oscar R. Ewing, a top Wall Street lawyer for the Aluminum Company of America. As Federal Security Agency Administrator for the Truman Administration with jurisdiction over the Public Health Service, it was Ewing who in 1950 endorsed public water fluoridation for the United States. Francis Cowles Freire. As Director of Research at the Aluminum Company of America from 1918, Freire was one of the most powerful science bureaucrats in the United States and grappled with the issue of fluoride emissions from aluminum smelters. It was Freire who made early suggestions to Gerald Cox, a researcher at the Mellon Institute, that fluoride might make strong teeth. General Leslie R. Groves, head of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Manhattan Project to build the world's first atomic bomb. Harold Carpenter Hodge, a biochemist and toxicologist at the University of Rochester who investigated fluoride for the U.S. Army's Manhattan Project, where he also supervised experiments in which unsuspecting hospital patients were injected with uranium and plutonium. After the war, Hodge chaired the National Research Council's Committee on Toxicology and became the leading scientific promoter of water fluoridation in the United States during the Cold War. Dudley A. Irwin, Alcoa's medical director who helped oversee Robert Kehoe's fluoride research at the Kettering Laboratory and who met personally with top fluoride researchers at the National Institute of Dental Research, NIDR, following the verdict in the Martin air pollution trial. Robert A. Kehoe. As the director of the Kettering Laboratory of Applied Physiology at the University of Cincinnati, Kehoe was the leading defender in the United States of the safety of leaded gasoline. Guided by a group of corporate attorneys known as the Fluorine Lawyers Committee, Kehoe similarly defended fluoride on behalf of a group of corporations that included DuPont, Alcoa, and U.S. Steel, all of which faced lawsuits for industrial fluoride pollution. Edward J. L. Argent, a researcher at the Kettering Laboratory who defended corporations accused of fluoride pollution and spent a career negating the fluoride warnings of the Danish scientist Kai Roholm. L'argent exposed his wife and son to hydrogen fluoride in a laboratory gas chamber. Nicholas C. Leone, the head of medical investigations at the federal government's NIDR, who was in close communication with industry's fluorine lawyers and who, following the 1955 Martin verdict, met with Alcoa's Dudley Irwin and the Kettering Laboratory's Robert Kehoe to discuss how government water fluoridation safety studies could help industry. William J. Marcus, a senior toxicologist in the EPA's Office of Drinking Water. In 1992, after he protested what he described as the systematic downgrading of the results of the government's study of cancer and fluoride, he was fired. A federal judge later ruled that he had been fired because of his scientific opinions on fluoride and ordered him reinstated. Paul and Verla Martin, Oregon farmers who were poisoned by fluoride from a Reynolds Metals aluminum plant. Their precedent-setting court victory in 1955 sparked emergency meetings between fluoride industry representatives and senior officials from the National Institute of Dental Research and launched a crash program of laboratory experiments at the Kettering Laboratory to prove industrial fluoride pollution safe. Phyllis J. Mullenix, a leading neurotoxicologist hired by the Forsyth Dental Center in Boston to investigate the toxicity of materials used in dentistry. In 1994, after her research indicated that fluoride was neurotoxic, she was fired. K.J. Eli Roholm, the Danish scientist who in 1937 published the book Fluorine Intoxication, an encyclopedic study of fluoride pollution and poisoning. He opposed giving fluoride to children. Philip Sattler, the third-generation son of a venerable Philadelphia family of chemists, Sattler gave expert testimony during the 1940s and 1950s on behalf of farmers and citizens who claimed that they had been poisoned by industrial fluoride pollution. He blamed fluoride for the most notorious air pollution disaster in U.S. history, during which 24 people were killed and several thousand were injured in Donora, Pennsylvania, over the Halloween weekend in 1948. Frank L. Siemens, a top lawyer for Alcoa, Siemens was also head of the group of senior attorneys known as the Fluorine Lawyers Committee, which represented big corporations in cases of alleged industrial fluoride pollution. George L. Walbot, a doctor and scientist and a leading expert on the health effects of environmental pollutants, Walbot's research in the 19505 and 196 O's on his own patients indicated that many people were uniquely sensitive to very small doses of fluoride. He founded the International Society for Fluoride Research and was a leader of the international and domestic opposition to water fluoridation. Colonel Stafford L. Warren, head of the Manhattan Project's medical section. Edward Ray Weidlein, director of the Mellon Institute, where Gerald Judy Cox carried out his studies.